to talk more about that, I'm joined by Bruce Clarke, a former member of the Collective for Civil Plaintiffs for Crimes in Rwanda. Thank you very much for joining us on France 24.
Thank you.
First of all, tell us a bit about Kabuga's alleged role in the genocide and how strong is the case against him?
The case against him is very, very strong because, in fact, in your introduction, you said that he's alleged to have bankrolled the genocide. But, I mean, he did several things. First of all, he created with his own money the RTLM, the Radio des Mille Collines, which is called as the hate radio, which is known as hate radio, which was the propaganda instrument of the genocide. A second thing he did just after the very beginning of the genocide was to create the National Defense Fund. The National Defense Fund was, in fact, a fund which was asking for money to finance the buying of arms, uniforms and other logistic support for the killers. He was also the person in charge of creating the militia, the Interhamwe militia, which was created in 1993. So, I mean, yes, of course, he is presumed guilty, and he's not actually guilty at the moment, but there is a lot against him. And I must say that he's been they've been looking for him for the last 26 years, basically. But Interpol's had an arrest warrant against him since 1997 or 1998.
Right, and he was hiding in plain sight. I mean, he was living in an apartment just a few miles from the French capital, right under the nose of the authorities. Why do you think it took the authorities so long to find him?
Well, I mean, the fact that he was found in the suburbs of Paris opens up a lot of questions, because either he had just arrived in France, which I doubt, in which case he should have been arrested at the airport, or he had been living there for a long time, and it makes one believe or think that maybe the French services, secret services weren't doing enough to find him, to arrest him. And it brings up the question of other people suspected of genocide crimes living in France, because basically there's been no prosecution opened up by the French state against the suspected criminals on French soil. The only prosecutions which have taken place have been brought by our association, the CPCR, and we're a civil society organization based on voluntary work. Nobody's paid in our association, and the main actors in our association, Alan and Dafrosa Gauthier, spend all their time constituting dossiers against suspected genocide killers. So, I mean, it opens up the sudden arrest today opens up a lot of questions about the inefficiency of the French justice system. And then beyond that, of course, are there any complicity with the killers? Because one thing which ought to be said about Kabuga, just the last thing, is that he was, in 1994, the richest man in Rwanda. And he financed, as I was saying, the planification and the execution of the genocide. What it underlines is that the genocide wasn't just a spontaneous violence. It had been planned for years beforehand. It had people thinking it out, what they call the planners. And these were intellectuals or businessmen. So again, when we talk about intellectuals and businessmen organizing a genocide, we talk about networks of international relations to help them escape or to protect them. And just to finish on this point, because I mean, this similarity which obviously comes to mind is the way in which the Nazis were able to escape from Europe after the Holocaust, after the Second World War, and were protected in third countries, particularly in South America or in let's say in southern countries. But Kabuga, as you said, as we know, was found in the suburbs of Paris. So that opens up questions about the efficiency.
Well, do you think that Kabuga's arrest will mark a turning point? Do you expect other major fugitives from the Rwandan genocide to now be found and arrested?
I'm not sure. I mean, I'd hope for other fugitives to be arrested, but there are many fugitives on French soil. Their names are there. There have been proceedings opened against them, which are going very, very slowly. as I said, because it is the CPCR, is a civil society organization bringing the proceedings against them and doing the inquiries. And for example, Kabuga, one of the accusations against him is that he was complicit with what we call the Akuza, which is let's say, the think tank of the genocide. The head of this think tank is somebody called Agathe Habiramana, who was the ex-wife, the widow of the president, the Rwandan president assassinated. She is living in the suburbs of Paris too, and let's say she has asked for political refugee status, which has been denied to her because of she is highly suspected of having been complicit in the genocide. So she is what you could call the most famous sans-papier, undocumented person in France at the moment. She is not arrested. She is there. We have her address. The French authorities have her address. When we come back to the arrest of Kabuga, what we could say is, and what's been underlined by the press today, is that it was thanks to international cooperation through several different countries, through the International Tribunal for Rwanda and their inquirers. And I mean, without being cynical about it, we could maybe think that it's because there's a lot of international pressure from other countries, from the international judicial structures to arrest Kabuga, because it was known that he was here. And I'm not trying to denigrate the work of the French police.
Clarke, right. I'm really sorry. We are running out of time, Bruce Clarke. But a lot of questions that will hopefully be answered at Kabuga's forthcoming trial. But thank you very much indeed for joining us there, Bruce Clarke.
Okay. Thank you very much.